The first Americans didn't cross a bridge. They walked across an entire continent that no longer exists. Between 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, Earth transformed into something nearly unrecognizable. Ice sheets 2 miles thick smothered northern Europe and North America. So much water got locked into these frozen fortresses that global sea levels plummeted nearly 400 feet. This wasn't just climate change. This was planetary reorganization on a scale that makes modern environmental concerns look modest by comparison. The dramatic drop in ocean levels exposed something extraordinary. Beringia. Not a narrow land bridge you could sprint across in an afternoon, but a legitimate subcontinent stretching roughly 1,000 miles north to south, larger than Texas. This wasn't some icy wasteland either. Picture rolling hills carved by rivers, expansive grasslands thick with vegetation, entire ecosystems supporting diverse megafauna. Mammoths grazed here, giant horses, bison herds that darkened the horizon. Caribou migrated in numbers that would make modern wildlife documentaries look sparse. Small bands of hunter-gatherers had been living in this region for millennia, following the herds, adapting to conditions harsh enough to kill the unprepared within hours. These weren't primitive people stumbling around hoping to survive. They possessed sophisticated knowledge of animal behavior, seasonal patterns, landscape features that could mean the difference between a successful hunt and starvation. Their survival required expertise we've largely forgotten. If you enjoy stories like this, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next sleep history. The genetic evidence tells a story more precise than any written history could. Mitochondrial DNA studies reveal that virtually all Native American populations share maternal lineages traceable to a relatively small founding population from northeastern Asia. 4 main genetic markers appear throughout the Americas. Haplogroups A, B, C, and D. Their closest relatives live in Siberia, Mongolia, and the Lake Baikal region of Russia. The distribution of these signatures suggests something crucial. The founding population was already genetically distinct before entering the Americas. They'd been isolated in Beringia for several thousand years. E-chromosome studies examining paternal lineages confirm the pattern. Haplogroup Q dominates among Native American males. Its origins trace to Central Asia. The expansion pattern from Beringia into the Americas shows clear directionality. Genetic diversity increases as you move south through the continents. Exactly what you'd expect from a single migration event followed by rapid population expansion. Recent advances in ancient DNA technology have sharpened this picture dramatically. Analysis of remains from both Siberia and the Americas reveals that ancestors of Native Americans experienced a significant population bottleneck in Beringia. Their effective population size dropped to perhaps just a few hundred individuals. This bottleneck lasted several millennia. During that time, the population remained genetically isolated from Asian relatives while developing unique characteristics that would spread throughout the Americas. When did humans actually enter the Americas south of the ice sheets? Traditional models, based on what we'll soon discuss as Clovis chronology, suggested around 13,500 years ago. That's when retreating glaciers supposedly opened viable migration routes. But mounting evidence from sites across both North and South America challenges this timeline aggressively. 2 primary routes have been proposed for human movement from Beringia into the heart of North America. The ice-free corridor hypothesis suggests that as climate warmed around 15,000 years ago, massive ice sheets blocking southward movement began separating. The Cordilleran and Laurentide ice sheets created a narrow corridor along the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. This corridor, running through present-day Alberta into the Great Plains, would have provided direct passage for humans and the animals they hunted. Recent geological research has complicated this picture, though. While ice sheets began separating earlier than previously thought, the corridor remained largely barren until approximately 13,000 years ago. Glacial lakes, exposed bedrock, sparse vegetation offering little sustenance for traveling groups. The landscape that emerged was initially harsh enough to question whether it provided viable passage at all. The coastal migration theory has gained serious traction as an alternative explanation. This model proposes that maritime adapted populations moved south along the Pacific coast, using watercraft to navigate between ice-free refugia, following rich marine resources. The Pacific coast during the late Pleistocene looked dramatically different than today. Lower sea levels meant coastlines extending far beyond current shores. Archaeological evidence supporting coastal migration remains frustratingly limited. Most potential sites now lie beneath hundreds of feet of ocean water. However, human remains and artifacts discovered on California's Channel Islands, dating to over 13,000 years ago, prove early Americans possessed sophisticated maritime technologies. The presence of these coastal populations, combined with rapid appearance of human occupations throughout South America by 14,000 years ago, suggests coastal migration may have been faster and more efficient than overland routes. The pre-Clovis debate has intensified with discoveries that fundamentally challenge previous assumptions. Monteverde in Chile provides compelling evidence for human occupation of South America by 14,600 years ago. Tom Dillahay's excavations revealed a well-preserved settlement, wooden structures, stone tools, organic remains clearly predating the earliest known sites by over 1,000 years. If humans reached southern Chile by 14,600 years ago, they must have entered North America considerably earlier, possibly by 16,000 years ago or more. Additional sites have reported pre-Clovis evidence, though many remain controversial. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania yielded radiocarbon dates extending to 19,000 years ago. Questions about contamination and stratigraphic integrity fuel ongoing debate. Similar controversies surround Cactus Hill in Virginia, Paisley Caves in Oregon, and the Buttermilk Creek Complex in Texas. All have produced evidence suggesting human presence before 13,500 years ago. The Buttermilk Creek Complex, located beneath the famous Galt site, has provided particularly compelling evidence. Excavations revealed thousands of stone tools in stratigraphic contexts clearly predating overlying occupations. Radiocarbon dates from this component range from 13,200 to 15,500 years ago. The relationship between these early populations and later cultures remains unclear. Some researchers argue for technological and cultural continuity, that sophisticated stone tool technologies were already being employed in North America well before the appearance of distinctive projectile points we're about to discuss. Others propose separate migration or technological innovation spreading rapidly across a continent already sparsely populated. Genetic evidence from ancient DNA studies suggests all Native American populations derived from the same founding population. Biological continuity existed even if cultural traditions varied. But cultural practices can transform dramatically while genetic heritage remains stable. The environmental context can't be overstated. The Americas that greeted first human inhabitants bore little resemblance to landscapes encountered by later European explorers. Vast ice sheets covered much of Canada and northern United States. Exposed continental shelves created land masses now submerged beneath oceans. Climate was significantly colder and more arid. Plant and animal communities differed dramatically from those existing today. Perhaps most dramatically, the Americas were home to spectacular megafauna that would become extinct by the end of the Pleistocene. Massive ground sloths the size of automobiles browsed forests from Alaska to Argentina. Saber-toothed cats stalked herds of horses, camels, and giant bison across plains. Enormous short-faced bears standing over 10 feet tall on hind legs dominated the predator landscape. American cheetahs, dire wolves, giant armadillos. This menagerie of creatures would have been encountered regularly by early Americans. The first Americans developed sophisticated strategies to exploit these animal resources. Evidence from kill sites across the continent reveals early hunter-gatherers successfully hunted everything from mammoth and mastodon to smaller game like caribou and elk. These hunting activities require detailed knowledge of animal behavior, seasonal migration patterns, landscape features that could be used advantageously during hunts. Stone tool technology among these early populations was already highly developed upon entering the Americas. The ancestors of what would become known as the Clovis culture brought sophisticated lithic reduction techniques with them from Asia. The ability to produce thin, sharp blades, bifacial tools requiring precise control. This technological foundation would prove crucial for survival in diverse and challenging environments. The stage was set for remarkable cultural adaptations. Small populations carrying advanced technological knowledge entered a continent teeming with resources. Megafauna populations that had never encountered human predators. Diverse ecosystems offering different opportunities across varied landscapes. What would emerge from this combination would represent one of the most significant technological achievements in human prehistory. Between 13,500 and 12,800 years ago, distinctive tool-making traditions emerged across North America. Various regional adaptations reflected local conditions and available resources. Among these traditions, none would prove more influential or widespread than the stonework innovations developed by people we now call the Clovis culture. Their mastery of lithic technology represents a zenith of prehistoric craftsmanship. Tools so precisely crafted and functionally superior that they revolutionize hunting strategies throughout an entire continent. For nearly 7 centuries, their distinctive projectile points would dominate the archaeological record across millions of square kilometers. These weren't crude implements hammered from convenient rocks. These were precision instruments requiring extraordinary skill to manufacture. Tools that pushed the boundaries of what could be achieved with stone. The hallmark of Clovis technology lies in projectile points unlike anything seen before or since. Artifacts measuring between 4 and 20 centimeters in length, exhibiting characteristic lanceolate shapes with concave bases and parallel to slightly convex edges. What sets Clovis points apart from all contemporary and earlier technologies is a distinctive feature called a flute, a channel extending from the base toward the tip on one or both faces. This fluting represents perhaps the most technically demanding aspect of Clovis manufacturing. The process required removing a single long flake from the base of an already thinned biface, creating a shallow channel extending up to 2/3 the point's length. Archaeological experiments demonstrate that successful fluting requires extraordinary skill, carries significant risk of catastrophic failure, destroying hours of careful work. The fact that Clovis knappers consistently achieved successful fluting across thousands of points, found throughout North America, speaks to technological standardization unprecedented in the archaeological record. This wasn't luck. This was mastery transmitted through rigorous social learning mechanisms. Knowledge passed from expert craftsmen to apprentices through demonstration, practice, and correction, skills that took years to develop properly. Manufacturing began with careful raw material selection. Clovis toolmakers demonstrated remarkable knowledge of stone properties, consistently choosing high-quality cryptocrystalline materials possessing necessary characteristics for producing large, thin bifaces. Chert formed the backbone of Clovis technology in eastern North America, fine-grained sedimentary rock, composed primarily of microcrystalline quartz, uniform crystal structure allowing predictable fracture patterns essential for controlled flake removal. In western regions, obsidian sources provided volcanic glass, offering the sharpest cutting edges achievable with stone technology. Obsidian's homogeneous structure and complete lack of crystal boundaries made it ideal for producing extremely thin cross-sections. Chemical sourcing studies reveal Clovis groups transported obsidian across distances exceeding 300 kilometers. Extensive trade networks or highly mobile populations maintaining detailed knowledge of widely scattered material sources. Chalcedony, jasper, and other cryptocrystalline silica varieties featured prominently in tool assemblages. Selection criteria consistently favored fine grain size, minimal inclusions, predictable fracture properties. Clovis knappers often rejected locally available materials, favoring higher quality stones from distant sources. Functional considerations outweighed convenience. The reduction strategy followed sophisticated sequences, maximizing utility while minimizing waste. Large flake blanks struck from prepared cores using hard hammer percussion provided foundations for biface manufacture. These blanks offered relatively flat surfaces with predetermined edge angles suitable for further shaping. Transforming blanks into finished points required mastery of pressure flaking techniques, allowing precise control over flake removal. Using tools fashioned from antler, bone, or dense wood, skilled knappers systematically removed small flakes from both faces, gradually reducing thickness while maintaining symmetrical form. Bifacial thinning required careful attention to edge angle maintenance and heat treatment timing, preventing fractures that could ruin developing tools. Heat treatment played crucial roles in Clovis technology. Heating chert and similar materials to temperatures between 350 and 400 degrees Celsius altered internal stone structure, making it more amenable to controlled flaking. Conducted in carefully controlled fires or heated sandbeds, improved knapping qualities while maintaining structural integrity. The fluting process represented manufacturing's culmination. Archaeological analysis suggests accomplishment through indirect percussion, using punch-like tools placed at point bases and struck with hammerstones. Precise placement combined with careful force control allowed skilled knappers to remove channel flakes without destroying points. Success rates for experimental fluting attempts by modern knappers rarely exceed 50%, even after extensive practice, highlighting exceptional skill levels Clovis artisans achieved. We're about to explore how these remarkable tools found their ultimate expression in confronting North America's massive Pleistocene megafauna, creatures that dwarfed any animals found on the continent today. Columbian mammoths towered over the landscape, nearly 14 feet at the shoulder. Tusks spiraling outward exceeded 12 feet in length. 6 tons of muscle, hide, and bone thundered across grasslands in herds that stretched to the horizon. Their seasonal migrations created predictable patterns, opportunities for hunters who studied their movements obsessively, who understood where mammoths would be when seasons changed, where they would drink, where they would pause. Woolly mammoths occupied northern territories, smaller but equally formidable, thick coats protecting against climatic extremes that would kill unprotected humans within hours. These creatures inhabited regions where winter temperatures plunged catastrophically, where summers barely provided respite. American mastodons presented different challenges entirely, distinguished by dental structure, reflecting browsing habits rather than grazing. 10 feet tall, 5 tons heavy, straighter tusks than mammoth relatives. Woody vegetation formed their diet, forest environments their domain. Eastern North America, their territory. Dense vegetation limited visibility. Modified hunting strategies became essential. Approaches developed specifically for forested conditions where mammoths' open grassland tactics failed utterly. Giant bison dwarfed modern descendants, twice the weight, horn spans reaching 6 feet across, massive herds creating thunder audible for miles, predictable seasonal movements offering repeated hunting opportunities. Not just meat, hides for shelter, bones for tools, materials supporting entire technological systems. Ground sloths added bizarre dimensions to this megafauna community. Megalonyx jeffersoni reached bear size, powerful claws stripping bark, defending against predators with devastating effectiveness. Glossotherium approached rhinoceros dimensions, Great Plains to southeastern United States. Slow-moving herbivores seemed accessible, but formidable claws and massive size demanded careful approaches, strategic planning, coordinated attacks. Hunting these creatures required unprecedented coordination. Archaeological evidence reveals complex orchestration, multiple individuals working synchronized roles, each hunter fulfilling specific functions within elaborate sequences. Approaching animals weighing several tons demanded organization representing significant advances beyond anything earlier hunting traditions achieved. Blackwater Draw provides thoroughly investigated examples. Discovered 1930s. Mammoth kills approximately 13,000 years ago. Pleistocene pond margins. Excavations revealed articulated mammoth remains. Direct association with Clovis points. Stone tools. Unambiguous evidence. Humans hunting massive creatures. Spatial artifact distribution suggests specific approaches. Hunters waited while mammoths drank. Predictable behavior patterns exploited ruthlessly. Massive creatures approaching water sources. Vulnerable moments. Multiple Clovis points embedded in mammoth bones, adjacent positions. Coordinated efforts. Several hunters simultaneously launching projectiles. Vital target areas. Intimate anatomical knowledge evident. Major blood vessels reachable through thick hide. Massive musculature. Stone tools recovered include projectile points plus complete butchering equipment, large cutting implements, choppers, scrapers, specialized equipment penetrating thick hides, processing massive meat quantities, fat, organic materials, systematic tool distribution around mammoth remains, organized work areas, different processing aspects occurring simultaneously. Murray Springs, Arizona presents compelling additional evidence. Mammoth and bison kills preserved, stratigraphic contexts allowing detailed reconstruction. 2 mammoths minimum, several bison, over 30 Clovis points, numerous stone tools, radiocarbon dates approximately 12,900 years ago. Near Clovis period end. Evidence suggests different strategies depending on species. Environmental context. Mammoth kills appear ambush hunting. Water sources. Similar patterns Blackwater Draw. However, bison remains show drive hunting. Animals herded into favorable locations. Mass killing. Strategic flexibility, demonstrating sophisticated understanding. Animal behavior. Environmental manipulation characterizing successful Clovis groups. Bone modifications provide detailed butchering insights. Systematic megafauna carcass exploitation. Cut marks on mammoth bones indicating detailed skeletal anatomy knowledge. Efficiently removing meat. Useful materials. Minimizing energy expenditure. Impact fractures on long bones suggesting systematic marrow extraction. Bone fragment distribution indicating organized waste disposal. Lena Site, Arizona adds further dimensions. Multiple mammoth kills relatively confined area. 9 young mammoths minimum. 13 Clovis points. Numerous artifacts. Juvenile animal concentration suggests selective hunting strategies. Targeting younger, manageable individuals. Avoiding extreme dangers confronting fully mature adults. Taphonomic analysis indicates kills occurred during relatively brief periods. Possibly single hunting episode. Closely spaced events. Articulated skeletal elements, preservation suggests rapid burial following kills. Exceptional insights into immediate aftermath. Tool distributions around individual carcasses reveal organized work areas. Specific processing activities. Systematic approaches to resource extraction. Utilization. Projectile technology employed represented Clovis lithic innovation culmination. Large, robust points at kill sites, 7 to 15 centimeters length, substantial thickness, carefully controlled edge angles optimized for penetrating thick hides, dense muscle tissue. Experimental studies demonstrate these weapons properly hafted, delivered with sufficient force. Possessed penetration capabilities adequate for inflicting lethal wounds. Largest Pleistocene mammals. Atlatl technology played crucial roles. Mechanical advantage necessary propelling heavy projectiles. Sufficient velocity penetrating mammoth mastodons' hides. Spear-throwing devices. Wooden shafts with hooks engaging dart butt ends. could increase projectile velocity 50% or more compared hand-thrown spears. Leverage provided allowed hunters maintaining safe distances, dangerous prey, delivering potentially lethal strikes. Coordination required demanded sophisticated communication systems, social organization. Archaeological evidence suggests Clovis hunting groups consisted multiple family units, coming together for major hunting episodes. Pooling knowledge, labor, complex operations. Individual families could not accomplish alone. These aggregations required leadership structures, decision-making processes, resource-sharing agreements. Far beyond organizational requirements, smaller-scale hunting activities. Seasonal mobility patterns closely tied to megafauna, prey movement patterns. Behavioral cycles. Mammoth herds followed predictable migration routes, summer and winter ranges, creating opportunities for hunters anticipating these movements, positioning themselves strategically. Water sources, mountain passes, river crossings became focal points. Landscape features channeled animal movements, predictable corridors. Timing hunting activities required detailed knowledge. Animal reproductive cycles, seasonal behavior changes, environmental conditions affecting prey vulnerability. Late summer and early fall represented optimal hunting seasons. Many megafauna species. Animals accumulated fat reserves for winter survival, but had not yet dispersed into smaller, less accessible groups. Pregnant females and juveniles provided preferred targets certain seasons. Mature males might be avoided except under specific circumstances. Processing megafauna carcasses presented logistical challenges requiring specialized knowledge, equipment. Single adult mammoth could provide over 2 tons meat, massive quantities, fat, hide, bone, useful materials. Sheer scale exceeded immediate consumption capabilities. Small hunting groups, necessitating preservation techniques, storage strategies allowing long-term utilization. Hunting success. Meat preservation likely involved combination of drying, smoking, fat rendering techniques, transforming perishable protein into storable forms. Winter consumption, transport during seasonal movements. Archaeological evidence for these activities remains limited. Poor organic materials preservation. But ethnographic parallels from Arctic and subarctic hunter-gatherers provide models, understanding how Clovis groups might have managed such abundant resources. Ecological relationships between Clovis hunters and Pleistocene megafauna extended beyond simple predator-prey interactions. These early Americans occupied complex ecosystems. Multiple large predators competed for similar resources, creating competitive pressures influencing hunting strategies. Settlement patterns, short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, American lions, all pose potential threats to human hunting groups, while simultaneously competing for access to megafauna prey. Scavenging opportunities provided alternative pathways accessing megafauna resources, without risks associated with active hunting. Clovis groups likely monitored large predator activities, taking advantage of kills made by other species when circumstances allowed. Distinctive cut marks found on some megafauna bones suggest humans sometimes gained access to carcasses after initial consumption by other predators, requiring different processing strategies adapted to partially consumed remains. The relationship between Clovis hunting practices and megafauna extinction remains one of the most contentious issues in North American archaeology. Rapid disappearance of most large mammal species at Pleistocene end coincides closely with Clovis technology appearance and spread, leading to ongoing debates about human hunting role in these extinctions. While climatic changes clearly played significant roles in ecosystem disruption, Clovis hunting technology efficiency and apparent megafauna population naivety toward human predation suggests hunting pressure may have contributed to population declines. Archaeological record indicates Clovis hunting focused primarily on proboscideans and large ungulates, less evidence for systematic exploitation of other megafauna species. This selective hunting pattern suggests Clovis groups targeted species providing optimal returns for hunting effort, while avoiding animals presenting excessive risks or limited rewards. Apparent preference for mammoth and mastodon hunting may reflect both substantial resources these animals provided and their behavioral characteristics, making them accessible to human hunters. Regional variations in Clovis megafauna hunting reflect adaptations to local environmental conditions. Prey availability. Great Plains sites show evidence for intensive bison hunting. Southeastern sites contain more diverse assemblages, including mastodon, horse, various smaller mammals. Western sites often preserve evidence for mammoth hunting in association with distinctive landscape features, facilitating successful hunting strategies. Technological innovations required for megafauna hunting extended beyond projectile points, include specialized tools for carcass processing, hide preparation, resource transport, large cutting implements, bone-breaking tools. Hide processing equipment represent technological adaptations, specifically designed for dealing with massive animal resources. Standardization of these tool types across Clovis sites suggests shared technological traditions, adapted to unique challenges of megafauna exploitation. The mastery of megafauna hunting characterizing Clovis culture was inextricably linked to highly sophisticated mobility patterns, social organization enabling these early Americans to exploit resources across vast continental distances. Archaeological evidence reveals Clovis groups maintained extraordinarily mobile lifestyles, moving seasonally across territories often exceeding 500 kilometers diameter, while maintaining complex social networks, facilitating information sharing, technological standardization across entire continent. This remarkable organizational system allowed relatively small populations successfully colonizing and exploiting diverse North American environments within just a few centuries span. Distribution of Clovis sites across North America presents patterns clearly reflecting mobility strategies employed by these early hunter-gatherers, rather than concentrated settlements indicating sedentary occupation. Clovis archaeological sites appear as widely scattered localities, representing temporary camps, kill sites, tool manufacturing areas, cached resource locations. This dispersed pattern extends from Yukon Territory, northwestern Canada, to Gulf Coast of Texas and Florida, encompassing virtually every major ecological zone on continent. Consistent presence of Clovis technology across such diverse environments demonstrates remarkable adaptability. These mobile populations to varying resource bases, climatic conditions, site density patterns reveal Clovis occupations were most frequent in areas providing optimal combinations: high-quality lithic resources, reliable water sources, predictable game concentrations. Great Plains show particularly dense concentrations of Clovis sites, reflecting both abundance of megafauna in grassland environments and presence of extensive high-grade chert deposits, providing essential raw materials for tool manufacture. River valleys throughout continents served as corridors for Clovis movement, offering reliable water sources, diverse plant and animal resources, natural pathways through otherwise challenging terrain. Temporary nature of most Clovis occupations is evident in archaeological signatures these sites preserve. Typical Clovis camps contain relatively thin cultural deposits, limited evidence for substantial structures or long-term habitation features. Instead, these sites preserve evidence for brief but intensive activities, including tool manufacture, hide processing, meat preparation, equipment maintenance. Artifact assemblages from these locations suggest Clovis groups carried most essential equipment with them, establishing temporary camps where specific tasks could be accomplished, before moving on to next location in seasonal rounds. Blackwater Draw serves as excellent example of multi-component nature. Clovis land use patterns beyond famous mammoth kill areas. Site contains evidence for multiple occupation episodes, spanning several decades or possibly centuries, These occupations include tool manufacturing areas. Large quantities lithic debris indicate intensive stone tool production. Processing areas where megafauna carcasses were systematically butchered. Maintenance areas where existing tools were resharpened and repaired. Spatial separation of these different activity areas suggests Clovis groups organize their camps according to functional requirements, while maintaining flexibility for rapid relocation when circumstances demanded. The Galt site in Texas provides exceptional insights into Clovis settlement organization through its preservation of extensive occupation areas with clearly defined activity zones. Excavations revealed discrete areas specialized for different aspects of daily life. Lithic reduction workshops, hide processing stations, hearth complexes for cooking and warmth, tool maintenance areas. The systematic organization of these activity areas indicates that Clovis groups possessed sophisticated understanding of camp layout principles, maximizing efficiency while minimizing interference between different tasks. Lithic workshops at Galt demonstrate intensive tool production activities characterizing many Clovis camps. These areas contain thousands of flakes, cores, tool fragments representing all stages of reduction sequence, from initial core preparation through finished tool manufacture. The presence of heat treatment facilities, evidenced by fire-cracked rock concentrations, thermally altered lithic materials, indicates Clovis knappers employed sophisticated techniques, improving raw material quality. The scale of lithic production at workshops like Galt suggests some camps served as staging areas. Groups prepared extensive tool inventories before embarking on extended hunting expeditions. Seasonal movements. Tool caches represent another crucial component of Clovis settlement systems, providing evidence for sophisticated logistical planning, enabling these mobile populations to maintain technological efficiency across vast territories. These caches typically contain collections of finished tools, raw materials, partially completed implements buried at strategic locations for future retrieval. The geographic distribution of known caches suggests Clovis groups established supply networks, allowed them to access essential resources without carrying excessive loads during movements. The East Wenatchee cache in Washington state exemplifies sophisticated planning evident in Clovis logistical systems. This remarkable assemblage contains over 40 stone tools, beautifully crafted Clovis points, knives, other implements manufactured from high-quality materials, obtained from sources hundreds of kilometers away. The tools were wrapped in organic materials, buried in a location that would have been easily relocated by individuals who placed them there. Radiocarbon dates indicate this cache was deposited approximately 13,000 years ago, placing it near the end of the Clovis period. The Fenn cache discovered in northwestern Wyoming provides additional evidence for Clovis caching behavior through its collection of exceptionally large and well-crafted bifaces. Many of these implements exceed normal size range of functional tools, suggesting they may have served ceremonial or display functions in addition to practical utility. The investment of labor required to produce such elaborate pieces indicates Clovis groups allocated significant time and skill to creating objects that transcended purely utilitarian purposes. Seasonal mobility patterns among Clovis populations can be reconstructed through analysis of site locations. Resource availability. Environmental conditions that would have influenced movement decisions. The geographic distribution of sites suggests many Clovis groups followed annual cycles, taking advantage of predictable resource concentrations at different times of year. Spring aggregations at favored hunting locations allowed for communal megafauna hunts. Social interactions between normally dispersed family groups. Summer dispersal into smaller territories enabled exploitation of diverse plant resources. Smaller game animals requiring less coordinated hunting efforts. Fall hunting activities focused on accumulating resources for winter survival. Emphasis on large game hunting. Intensive processing activities producing storable food supplies. Winter camps were typically established in sheltered locations providing protection from harsh weather, offering access to cached resources, reliable water sources. The cyclical nature of these movements created predictable patterns, allowed different groups to coordinate their activities, maintained social connections despite vast distances involved. Territorial ranges for individual Clovis groups appear to have been enormous by standards of most hunter-gatherer societies. Lithic sourcing studies reveal Clovis toolmakers regularly obtained raw materials from sources located 200 to 300 kilometers from sites where finished tools were ultimately discarded. Some exceptional cases document transport distances exceeding 500 kilometers, indicating either direct procurement through long-distance travel or exchange networks, moving materials across multiple group territories. The Thunderbird site in Virginia illustrates extensive territorial ranges evident in Clovis settlement patterns. Lithic materials at this site derive from sources scattered across a region encompassing parts of 5 modern states, some materials originating from locations over 400 kilometers away. The diversity of raw material sources represented at single sites suggests Clovis groups either maintained enormous annual territories or participated in exchange networks providing access to distant resources through trade relationships. Social organization among Clovis populations must have been sufficiently sophisticated to coordinate complex logistical requirements of their mobile lifestyle, while maintaining technological and cultural coherence across continental distances. Group size estimates based on site areas, hearth distributions. Resource consumption patterns suggest typical Clovis bands consisted of 20 to 40 individuals, representing several related families. These small groups would have been large enough to accomplish coordinated hunting activities necessary for megafauna exploitation, while remaining small enough to move efficiently across landscape without overwhelming local resource bases. The egalitarian nature of Clovis social organization is suggested by relatively uniform distribution of high-quality tools, exotic materials across different sites and regions, unlike later archaeological cultures showing clear evidence for social stratification, differential access to resources. Clovis assemblages display remarkable consistency in tool quality, raw material access regardless of site location or apparent function. This pattern suggests Clovis society operated according to principles of resource sharing, reciprocal exchange preventing accumulation of wealth, status differentiation based on material possessions. Information sharing networks among Clovis populations must have been extraordinarily effective, accounting for rapid spread and remarkable consistency of their technology across entire continent. The standardization of tool forms, manufacturing techniques, technological innovations across distances exceeding 3,000 kilometers indicates communication systems that could transmit complex technical information between widely separated groups. These networks likely operated through combination of direct contact during seasonal aggregations, multi-step information transfer through intermediate groups, maintaining connections across vast territories. The speed with which Clovis technology spread across North America suggests information transmission occurred much more rapidly than population movement alone could account for. Mathematical models of cultural diffusion indicate observed pattern of Clovis expansion, required active mechanisms for sharing technological innovations between existing populations, rather than simple replacement of earlier groups by expanding Clovis populations. This rapid cultural transmission implies sophisticated social mechanisms for evaluating, adopting, standardizing new technologies across diverse environmental and cultural contexts. Gender roles and division of labor within Clovis society must be inferred primarily from archaeological evidence. Ethnographic analogies with historically documented hunter-gatherer groups. The emphasis on large game hunting evident in archaeological record suggests adult males played prominent roles in pursuit and killing of megafauna, activities requiring significant physical strength, coordination, specialized knowledge. However, successful processing and utilization of massive carcasses would have required participation of entire social groups, including women and children who contributed essential skills in hide preparation, meat processing, resource preservation. Tool assemblages from Clovis sites include implements associated with both male and female activities in ethnographically documented societies. Projectile points and hunting equipment represent technologies typically associated with male activities, while scrapers, cutting tools, processing implements reflect full range of subsistence activities requiring participation from all group members. The high quality and sophisticated manufacture of tools associated with hide processing and plant preparation indicates these activities were valued equally with hunting. In terms of technological investment and skill development, the organization of activities within Clovis camps suggests labor was divided according to specialized knowledge and skill requirements, rather than rigid gender-based restrictions. Archaeological evidence for discrete activity areas indicates different tasks were spatially separated, allowing individuals with appropriate expertise to work efficiently without interference from incompatible activities. This organizational flexibility would have been essential for groups needing to accomplish complex processing tasks rapidly before moving to new locations. Social structures enabling Clovis groups to maintain cultural coherence across vast distances likely included kinship systems, facilitating interaction between normally dispersed populations. Exogamy requirements mandating marriage outside immediate family groups would have created networks of kinship relationships extending across multiple band territories. These kinship connections provided frameworks for cooperation, resource sharing, information exchange transcending boundaries of individual residential groups. Seasonal aggregation sites, where multiple bands gathered for communal hunting or social activities, served crucial functions in maintaining Clovis cultural integration. These gatherings provided opportunities for young adults to find marriage partners outside natal groups, for specialists to share technological innovations, for leaders to coordinate activities across larger territorial areas. The social activities occurring during these aggregations likely included ceremonies, competitions, exchanges that reinforced cultural identity while facilitating spread of new ideas and technologies. Leadership structures within Clovis society probably emphasized situational authority based on expertise and experience, rather than permanent hierarchical positions. Successful megafauna hunting required coordination by individuals with detailed knowledge of animal behavior, hunting techniques, group management skills. These hunt leaders would have possessed temporary authority during hunting episodes, while deferring to other specialists in different contexts, such as tool manufacture, route planning, resource processing. Decision-making processes governing Clovis group movements and resource utilization likely involved consensus-building mechanisms, incorporating input from multiple individuals with relevant expertise. Choices about when and where to move, which resources to exploit, how to respond to environmental challenges would have required integration of diverse knowledge sets, including weather patterns, animal behavior, resource availability, social obligations to other groups. The success of Clovis adaptations across diverse environments suggests these decision-making processes were highly effective at incorporating relevant information, producing appropriate responses to changing circumstances. Conflict resolution mechanisms within Clovis society must have been sophisticated enough to maintain group cohesion, despite stresses associated with mobile lifestyles and resource competition. The small size of typical Clovis bands would have made internal conflicts particularly disruptive, necessitating social mechanisms addressing disputes before they threatened group survival. The apparent absence of defensive features at Clovis sites suggests intergroup violence was relatively uncommon, possibly reflecting effective territorial agreements, resource sharing arrangements, minimizing competition between different bands. The remarkable success of Clovis populations in colonizing and exploiting North American environments within such brief time period reflects effectiveness of their social and settlement systems in adapting to diverse and challenging conditions. Their ability to maintain technological standardization while remaining flexible enough to exploit varying resource bases demonstrates sophisticated organizational capabilities, enabling rapid expansion across entire continent. These achievements established foundation for all subsequent human occupation of North America, creating precedents for mobile hunting adaptations that would influence indigenous cultures for millennia to come. The sophisticated material culture and daily life practices that characterize Clovis populations were expressed across a geographic range encompassing virtually the entire North American continent, from ice-free corridors of Alaska to tropical environments of northern South America. This extraordinary distribution represents one of the most rapid and extensive cultural expansions in human prehistory, achieved within a time span of less than 7 centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals that Clovis technology and cultural practices spread across approximately 4.5 million square kilometers, adapting to environments ranging from Arctic tundra to subtropical forests, while maintaining remarkable technological consistency across vast distances. The northernmost Clovis sites extend into Alaska and Yukon territory, where groups adapted their technologies to harsh subarctic conditions, characterized by extreme seasonal temperature variations and limited growing seasons. The Broken Mammoth site in central Alaska preserves evidence of Clovis occupation dating to approximately 13,000 years ago, featuring distinctive fluted points associated with hearth features and tool manufacturing debris. The lithic assemblage from this site demonstrates adaptations to local raw material sources, including extensive use of high-quality chert from regional geological formations that provided alternatives to exotic materials commonly transported across great distances in more southern regions. Alaskan Clovis sites reveal modifications in settlement patterns that reflect adaptations to extreme northern environments. Sites tend to be located in sheltered valley locations that provided protection from harsh winds while offering access to reliable water sources and game migration routes. The distribution of these northern sites follows major river systems that served as natural corridors for both human movement and animal migrations, creating predictable zones of resource concentration that could support human populations during brief summer seasons. The technological adaptations evident at northern Clovis sites include modifications in tool design and manufacturing techniques that accommodated specific challenges of Arctic and subarctic environments. Projectile points from these regions tend to be more robust than their southern counterparts, with thicker cross-sections and reinforced hafting areas that could withstand extreme stresses associated with hunting large Arctic mammals. The presence of specialized cold weather equipment demonstrates the remarkable flexibility of Clovis cultural systems. Moving southward, the Great Plains region contains the highest density of Clovis sites anywhere in North America, reflecting both optimal environmental conditions for preservation and exceptional abundance of resources that supported substantial Clovis populations. The Llano Estacado of eastern New Mexico and western Texas alone contains over 50 documented Clovis localities, creating a concentration of archaeological sites unmatched anywhere else on the continent. This density pattern reflects the optimal combination of abundant megafauna populations, extensive high-quality lithic resources, and environmental conditions that favored both human occupation and archaeological preservation. Plains Clovis sites demonstrate the most intensive megafauna hunting activities documented anywhere in the archaeological record. Sites like Blackwater Draw, Murray Springs, and Lena preserve evidence for systematic mammoth and bison hunting that involved sophisticated, coordinated strategies and intensive carcass processing activities. The artifact assemblages from these sites include the largest and most elaborate Clovis points known, with some specimens exceeding 15 centimeters in length. and displaying exceptional craftsmanship that represents the pinnacle of Clovis lithic technology. The morphological characteristics of Plains Clovis points reflect adaptations to specific requirements of megafauna hunting in open grassland environments. These implements typically feature broad, robust blades with reinforced tips capable of penetrating the thick hides and dense musculature of mammoth and mastodon. The fluting on plains specimens tends to be particularly well executed, with channels extending up to 2/3 the length of the point and demonstrating exceptional skill levels achieved by craftsmen in this region. Regional variations in Plains Clovis technology also reflect adaptations to local raw material sources and environmental conditions. Sites in the Colorado Piedmont show extensive use of high-quality alabates, chert obtained from sources in the Texas Panhandle, indicating trade networks or territorial ranges that extended across hundreds of kilometers. The systematic exploitation of these premium raw materials demonstrates sophisticated logistical planning that enabled Plains Clovis groups to maintain technological standards despite challenges of resource procurement across vast distances. Eastern North America presents a dramatically different pattern of Clovis site distribution, with occupations scattered across diverse forested environments from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. The lower density of eastern sites compared to plains concentrations likely reflects both environmental factors that influence preservation and different settlement strategies adapted to forested environments with more dispersed resource bases. Eastern Clovis sites tend to occur in association with major river systems, wetland margins, and other landscape features that concentrated resources in otherwise heavily forested regions. The Shawnee Minisink site in Pennsylvania exemplifies Eastern Clovis adaptations to riverine environments that provided access to diverse aquatic and terrestrial resources. Excavations at this site revealed evidence for systematic exploitation of fish, waterfowl, and plant resources alongside more traditional Clovis hunting activities. The artifact assemblage includes specialized tools for processing aquatic resources and plant materials, demonstrating technological flexibility that enabled Eastern Clovis groups to exploit diverse resource bases. Morphological variations in Eastern Clovis points reflect adaptations to forested hunting environments, where different strategies were required for pursuing game in dense vegetation. Eastern specimens tend to be smaller and more finely crafted than their plains counterparts, with thinner cross-sections and more delicate fluting that reflects different functional requirements. The reduced size and weight of eastern points may reflect adaptations to hunting smaller game species, or the need for improved accuracy in forested environments where shot distances were limited by vegetation. The Thunderbird site in Virginia provides exceptional evidence for Eastern Clovis lithic procurement strategies through its diverse assemblage of raw materials obtained from sources scattered across the Appalachian region. Chemical sourcing studies reveal that toolmakers at this site utilize materials from at least 8 different geological sources located across a region spanning 400 kilometers. This pattern indicates either extensive territorial ranges or sophisticated exchange networks that provided access to high-quality lithic materials despite challenges of transport through heavily forested terrain. Southeastern Clovis sites reveal adaptations to warm, humid environments that supported different plant and animal communities than those found in northern regions. Sites like Page-Ladson in Florida preserve evidence for Clovis occupation in association with mastodon remains in underwater contexts that provide exceptional preservation of organic materials. These sites demonstrate that Clovis groups successfully adapted their technologies and subsistence strategies to subtropical environments while maintaining distinctive cultural characteristics that define the tradition. The morphology of southeastern Clovis points shows subtle but consistent differences from specimens found in other regions, including modifications in blade proportions and fluting characteristics that may reflect local stylistic preferences or functional adaptations. Southeastern points often feature more pronounced basal concavity and distinctive edge beveling that creates asymmetrical cross-sections. These modifications may represent regional traditions that developed within the broader Clovis technological framework, while maintaining overall consistency with continental patterns. Western North America presents perhaps the most diverse range of Clovis adaptations, with sites distributed across environments ranging from Pacific coastal regions to high-elevation mountain valleys. The complex topography and diverse environmental zones of Western regions created opportunities for specialized adaptations while presenting challenges for maintaining cultural connections across fragmented landscapes. Western Clovis sites often occur in association with distinctive geological features that provided access to high-quality lithic resources or strategic advantages for hunting activities. The East Wenatchee site in Washington state demonstrates Western Clovis adaptations to mountainous environments through its remarkable cache of tools manufactured from exotic materials obtained from sources scattered across the Pacific Northwest. The implements in this cache display exceptional craftsmanship and include some of the most elaborate Clovis points known anywhere, suggesting that Western groups achieved particularly high levels of technological sophistication. The investment of labor required to produce such exceptional tools indicates that Western Clovis groups allocated substantial time and resources to technological activities. Coastal Clovis adaptations along the Pacific shore involve technologies for exploiting marine and estuarine resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting activities. Sites on the Channel Islands of California preserve evidence for early maritime adaptations that included sophisticated watercraft technology and systematic exploitation of marine mammals. These coastal adaptations demonstrate remarkable flexibility of Clovis cultural systems in responding to diverse environmental opportunities while maintaining technological and cultural coherence. The relationship between Clovis and contemporary archaeological cultures provides insights into cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America and processes through which different technological traditions developed and spread. The Folsom culture, which succeeded Clovis across much of the Great Plains after 12,800 years ago, represents a clear technological continuation that maintained many Clovis characteristics, while developing distinctive innovations adapted to changing environmental conditions following megafauna extinctions. Folsom projectile points exhibit clear technological relationships to Clovis prototypes, while displaying distinctive modifications that reflect adaptations to different hunting requirements. Folsom points feature more extensive fluting that often extends the full length of the implement, creating extremely thin cross-sections that required exceptional manufacturing skill to produce successfully. The development of this enhanced fluting technology represents technological intensification that built upon Clovis innovations while pushing lithic manufacturing techniques to new levels of sophistication. Contemporary cultures in other regions show varying degrees of relationship to Clovis technological traditions, reflecting complex cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America. The Gainey culture of the Great Lakes region exhibits clear Clovis affinities in projectile point technology, while displaying distinctive regional characteristics in other tool categories. Gainey points feature Clovis-style fluting and overall morphology, but tend to be manufactured from different raw materials and show subtle variations in proportional relationships. Site preservation issues significantly influence our understanding of Clovis geographic distribution and create biases that affect interpretations of settlement patterns and population densities. The archaeological visibility of Clovis occupations varies dramatically across different environmental zones, with preservation conditions in some regions providing excellent opportunities for site discovery, while other areas offer limited potential for archaeological detection of ancient occupations. Arid and semi-arid regions of the American Southwest provide optimal preservation conditions for Clovis sites through low precipitation levels that minimize chemical weathering and erosion processes that could destroy archaeological deposits. The alkaline soils characteristic of these regions also favor preservation of bone and other organic materials that provide crucial evidence for Clovis subsistence activities and technological practices. The high visibility of artifacts in desert environments facilitates site discovery and create sampling biases that may overrepresent Clovis occupation of arid regions. Forested regions of eastern North America present significant challenges for Clovis site preservation and discovery through acidic soil conditions that destroy bone materials and dense vegetation that obscures surface artifacts. The deep soil development characteristic of forested environments often buries archaeological deposits beneath substantial overburden that makes site detection difficult without systematic subsurface testing. These preservation and visibility issues likely result in significant underrepresentation of eastern Clovis populations in the archaeological record. Coastal regions present particular challenges for understanding Clovis distributions due to sea level changes that have submerged many potential sites beneath modern ocean waters. The 120-metre sea level rise that occurred following the end of the Pleistocene placed vast areas of former coastline beneath continental shelves, removing potential Clovis sites from archaeological accessibility. The few coastal Clovis sites that remain accessible on modern land surfaces may represent only a small fraction of the original coastal occupation pattern. Recent advances in archaeological survey techniques and site detection methods are beginning to address some of these preservation and visibility issues through systematic approaches that can identify buried sites and recognize archaeological deposits in challenging environmental contexts. Remote sensing technologies, geophysical survey methods, and systematic subsurface testing programs are revealing Clovis sites in regions where traditional survey approaches had failed to detect ancient occupations. The application of these advanced techniques is gradually filling gaps in our understanding of Clovis geographic distribution, while revealing the true extent of regional variations in settlement patterns and technological adaptations. As more sites are discovered and investigated using modern archaeological methods, our understanding of Clovis cultural geography continues to evolve, revealing increasingly complex patterns of adaptation and regional variation across the North American continent. The remarkable geographic distribution and regional adaptations that characterize Clovis culture across North America would face their ultimate test during one of the most dramatic climatic episodes in Earth's recent history. Beginning approximately 12,900 years ago, a sudden and severe cooling event, known as the Younger Dryas, transformed the environmental conditions that had supported Clovis populations for nearly 6 centuries. This climatic reversal, lasting until approximately 11,700 years ago, brought glacial conditions back to much of northern North America, just as the continent appeared to be emerging from the grip of the last ice age. The onset occurred with startling rapidity. Paleoclimatic evidence indicates that average temperatures dropped by 8 to 15 degrees Celsius across much of North America within the span of just a few decades. Ice core data from Greenland reveals that this transition happened so quickly that individual annual layers preserve the progression from warm to cold conditions. The climate system had crossed a critical threshold that triggered rapid reorganization of atmospheric and oceanic circulation patterns. Human populations that had adapted their settlement patterns and subsistence strategies to the relatively stable warming trend of the preceding millennium faced unprecedented challenges. The geographic extent of this cooling encompassed virtually the entire North American continent, though the magnitude of temperature depression varied significantly across different regions. The most severe impacts occurred in the northern and eastern portions of the continent, where advancing ice sheets and permafrost expansion created conditions comparable to those that had existed during the height of the last glacial maximum. Vegetation patterns underwent massive reorganization in response to the rapid cooling and increased aridity. Spruce and fir forests that had been expanding northward during the preceding warm interval were forced to retreat southward, while grassland and steppe vegetation expanded across much of the continental interior. The mixed, deciduous forests that had been developing across the eastern United States contracted dramatically, replaced by boreal species adapted to colder conditions and shorter growing seasons. These rapid changes in plant communities disrupted the seasonal resource scheduling that had enabled Clovis groups to maintain their mobile lifestyle across vast territories. Paleobotanical evidence from sites across the continent documents the disappearance of many plant species that had formed important components of late Pleistocene ecosystems, while others shifted their geographic ranges by hundreds of kilometers within just a few centuries. Pollen records from lake sediments and bog deposits provide detailed documentation of vegetation responses to younger Dryas cooling across different regions. In the Great Plains, grassland species that had supported large herbivore populations gave way to sparse cold-adapted vegetation that could support much lower animal biomass. The productive parkland environments that had characterized the transition zones between forests and grasslands largely disappeared. The eastern deciduous forests that had been expanding across much of the southeastern United States experienced dramatic contractions as cold-adapted conifers advanced from northern refugia. Oak, hickory, and other deciduous species that had provided important nut crops for human populations retreated to small refugial areas in the southern Appalachians and Gulf coastal plain. The loss of these productive forest ecosystems eliminated crucial plant resources that had supplemented hunting returns and provided essential carbohydrates for human populations. Animal populations responded to these vegetation changes through complex patterns of migration, population decline, and local extinction that fundamentally altered the resource base available to human hunters. The massive herds of megafauna that had characterized late Pleistocene, North America began experiencing severe population stress as their preferred habitats disappeared or became fragmented. Mammoth populations, already under pressure from human hunting activities, faced additional challenges as the grassland and parkland environments they required contracted dramatically across their former ranges. The timing of megafauna extinctions across North America corresponds closely with the onset of younger Dryas cooling. Radiocarbon dates from the latest mammoth remains indicate that most populations disappeared between 12,900 and 12,400 years ago, coinciding precisely with the initial cooling phase. Mastodon populations persisted somewhat longer in eastern North America, with the latest reliable dates extending to approximately 12,000 years ago in the Great Lakes region. Ground sloth populations also experienced severe declines during the early Younger Dryas, with most species disappearing from the fossil record by 12,500 years ago. These large herbivores, which had been important prey species for some Clovis groups, appear to have been particularly vulnerable to the combined effects of habitat loss and human predation. Large predator populations faced cascading effects as their prey species declined or disappeared entirely. Short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, and dire wolves all experienced population crashes during the early Younger Dryas as the megafauna communities that had supported them collapsed. The elimination of these large predators reduced competition for remaining prey species, but also removed scavenging opportunities that may have provided supplementary resources for human populations. Smaller mammal populations showed more complex responses. Caribou and elk populations may have initially increased as their preferred cold-adapted habitats expanded, though these gains were likely temporary as overall ecosystem productivity declined. Bison populations appear to have maintained viable numbers in some regions, particularly in the Great Plains, where grassland habitats persisted despite overall cooling trends. Bird populations experienced dramatic shifts in distribution and abundance as their preferred habitats underwent rapid transformation. Waterfowl species that had utilized the extensive wetland systems of late Pleistocene North America faced challenges as many water bodies froze for extended periods or dried up entirely due to increased aridity. The proposed extraterrestrial impact hypothesis has emerged as one of the most controversial explanations for the rapid onset of Younger Dryas cooling and associated environmental changes. This hypothesis suggests that a cosmic impact event, possibly involving multiple airbursts or surface impacts from a fragmented comet, occurred approximately 12,900 years ago and triggered the climatic cooling that characterized the Younger Dryas period. Evidence cited in support includes the presence of microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and other exotic materials in sedimentary layers dating to the Younger Dryas boundary at sites across North America and Europe. These materials, according to impact proponents, represent the signature of high-temperature, high-pressure processes that could only result from cosmic impact events. Supporters argue that such an event could have triggered massive wildfires across North America, as evidenced by widespread charcoal deposits and soot layers found in Younger Dryas boundary sediments. These fires would have destroyed vast areas of vegetation and released enormous quantities of smoke and particulates into the atmosphere, potentially blocking solar radiation and triggering rapid cooling. The timing of the proposed impact coincides closely with the disappearance of Clovis culture from the archaeological record, leading some researchers to suggest that the impact event may have directly affected human populations through environmental devastation and resource depletion. The rapid abandonment of many Clovis sites and the apparent discontinuity between Clovis and subsequent archaeological cultures has been interpreted as evidence for population crashes or cultural disruption. Critics have raised numerous objections to both the evidence and the proposed mechanisms for triggering Younger Dryas cooling. Alternative explanations for the exotic materials found in boundary sediments include terrestrial sources such as volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and normal cosmic dust accumulation. The microscopic diamonds cited as impact evidence have been found to occur naturally in many geological contexts and may not require impact processes for their formation. The geographic distribution of proposed impact evidence shows significant inconsistencies that challenge the cosmic impact interpretation. Many sites that should contain impact signatures, if the hypothesis were correct, show no evidence for exotic materials or unusual environmental changes at the Younger Dryas boundary. Alternative mechanisms for triggering Younger Dryas cooling focus primarily on changes in ocean circulation patterns that could have disrupted the transport of warm water to high latitudes. The collapse of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which transports warm surface water northward and returns cold deep water southward, could have triggered rapid cooling across the North Atlantic region. Massive freshwater releases from glacial Lake Agassiz, which covered much of central Canada during the late Pleistocene, may have provided the trigger for circulation collapse and subsequent cooling. As climate warmed during the late Pleistocene, this enormous glacial lake accumulated vast quantities of meltwater that were periodically released into the ocean through different drainage routes. A particularly large release of fresh water into the North Atlantic, approximately 12,900 years ago, could have disrupted ocean circulation and triggered the Younger Dryas cooling event. Evidence for massive freshwater releases includes sedimentological indicators of catastrophic flooding along the drainage routes that connected Lake Agassiz to the Atlantic Ocean. The channeled scablands of eastern Washington preserve dramatic evidence for enormous floods that carved deep channels through solid bedrock, demonstrating the scale of water releases that occurred during glacial lake drainage events. Computer models of ocean circulation demonstrate that freshwater inputs of the magnitude suggested by geological evidence could indeed disrupt the Atlantic circulation system and trigger cooling patterns similar to those observed during the Younger Dryas. Volcanic activity represents another potential trigger for Younger Dryas cooling through the injection of sulfur dioxide and particulates into the atmosphere. Large volcanic eruptions can cause temporary global cooling by reflecting solar radiation and altering atmospheric chemistry. The Lachasea eruption in Germany, which occurred approximately 12,900 years ago, has been proposed as a potential trigger. Clovis populations responded to these environmental challenges through various adaptive strategies that reflected both the flexibility of their cultural systems and the constraints imposed by rapidly changing conditions. Archaeological evidence for these responses includes changes in settlement patterns, technological modifications, and apparent shifts in subsistence strategies that enabled some groups to survive the initial phases of environmental deterioration. Site abandonment patterns during the early Younger Dryas suggest that many Clovis groups were forced to abandon territories that had become unsuitable for human occupation due to resource depletion or climatic deterioration. The northern margins of Clovis distribution show particularly clear evidence for site abandonment. Technological responses included modifications in tool design and manufacturing techniques that reflected changing resource availability and hunting requirements. Projectile points from late Clovis contexts show increased standardization and reduced size variation, possibly reflecting more intensive curation of lithic resources as high-quality raw materials became more difficult to obtain. Subsistence diversification appears to have been a crucial adaptive strategy for Clovis groups facing the collapse of megafauna populations and changing plant communities. Archaeological assemblages from late Clovis sites show increased emphasis on smaller game species and more intensive exploitation of plant resources. Human ingenuity would prove more resilient than the massive beasts that had defined an era. The emerging toolkit represented adaptations to environments where massive prey animals had vanished forever. Groups scattered across the southeast embraced Dalton technologies, crafting distinctive serrated points that sliced through smaller game with lethal efficiency. These weren't crude replacements for Clovis weapons. They were evolutionary improvements, purpose-built for a transformed world. The beveled bases locked firmly into hafts, while serrated edges created wounds that brought down deer and turkey with remarkable effectiveness. Archaeological sites across Arkansas, Tennessee, and Missouri preserve evidence of this technological revolution. The Brand site demonstrates how Dalton groups orchestrated their lives around seasonal abundance. Spring occupations targeted spawning fish runs. Summer camps emphasized diverse plant gathering. Fall activities centered on intensive nut processing that would sustain communities through lean winter months. This wasn't desperate improvisation. It was sophisticated environmental management that required encyclopedic knowledge of landscape and seasons. Plant processing became increasingly central to survival strategies. Grinding stones from Dalton sites showed distinctive wear patterns, indicating systematic reduction of nuts, seeds, and roots into consumable forms. The investment in plant processing equipment reveals a fundamental shift in subsistence priorities. Mammoth hunters had carried lightweight toolkits optimized for mobility. Dalton groups invested in heavy grinding stones that required permanent base camps. This wasn't merely technological change. It represented a complete reimagining of how humans organized their relationship with the land. The Great Lakes region spawned its own distinct responses to environmental transformation. Gainey culture emerged around 12,800 years ago, maintaining recognizable connections to Clovis traditions while developing regional innovations. Gainey points preserved the characteristic fluting that had defined earlier technologies, but subtle modifications in base shape and edge angles reflected changing functional requirements. These weren't mere stylistic variations. They represented systematic adaptations to hunting white-tailed deer through dense forests rather than pursuing mammoths across open grasslands. Barnes culture followed Gainey in some areas, pushing technological innovation even further from Clovis precedents. Barnes points featured pronounced notches that created entirely different hafting systems. The innovations enabled more secure attachment to wooden shafts while reducing breakage rates during impact. Archaeological experiments demonstrate that notched points could be replaced more quickly than fluted varieties when damage occurred during hunts. This practical advantage became crucial as groups pursued smaller, more elusive prey that required multiple shots rather than the single coordinated strikes that had brought down mammoths. Western regions witnessed perhaps the most dramatic technological transformations. Stemmed point traditions abandoned fluting entirely, developing hafting systems that offered distinct advantages for certain hunting strategies. Western stemmed points from the Great Basin show remarkable morphological diversity, reflecting adaptations to varied prey species and environmental conditions. Desert variants were optimized for hunting pronghorn and rabbits. Mountain versions featured robust constructions suitable for pursuing bighorn sheep across rugged terrain. Coastal forms incorporated design elements that improved performance when hunting marine mammals and processing fish. This regional diversification created a technological mosaic across Western North America. The Hasket culture of the northern Intermountain West developed distinctive points with reduced fluting and modified base configurations. The Windus complex along the Columbia River produced stemmed points specifically adapted to salmon fishing and riverine resource exploitation. Each regional tradition represented successful solutions to local environmental challenges, yet the speed with which these innovations appeared suggests rapid cultural evolution driven by environmental necessity rather than gradual refinement. The mechanisms driving this technological diversification remain subjects of intense archaeological investigation. Did separate populations independently develop similar solutions to comparable problems? Or did information networks continue operating across reduced distances, enabling innovation diffusion through neighboring groups? Evidence suggests both processes operated simultaneously. Some technological features appear across vast distances, indicating continued information exchange. Other innovations show strictly local distributions, suggesting independent development in response to specific environmental conditions. Population movements during this transition period created opportunities for cultural mixing that accelerated technological change. Archaeological evidence indicates some groups abandoned traditional territories entirely, migrating toward regions with more reliable resources. These population shifts brought together peoples with different technological traditions, creating circumstances favorable for innovation through cultural exchange. Sites showing mixed assemblages of different point types document these encounters between populations carrying distinct technological knowledge. Social organization underwent equally profound transformations. Clovis society had emphasized the fluid, highly mobile bands necessary for tracking migrating mammoth herds across continental distances. Post-Clovis adaptations favored larger, more sedentary groups capable of exploiting diverse local resources through coordinated labor. This reorganization required new leadership structures and decision-making processes. Rather than temporary hunt leaders whose authority derived from specialized knowledge of mammoth behavior, post-Clovis groups needed individuals who could coordinate complex seasonal scheduling of multiple resource extraction activities. The increased importance of plant resources created opportunities for knowledge specialization that may have altered gender dynamics within hunter-gatherer groups. Ethnographic studies of historically documented societies suggest that plant gathering and processing typically involved substantial female labor contributions. If similar patterns characterized post-Clovis groups, women's roles in resource acquisition may have become more economically central than during the mammoth hunting era. This shift could have enhanced female status and influence within community decision-making processes. Though archaeological evidence for such social changes remains indirect and subject to multiple interpretations, storage technologies became crucial for managing seasonal resource availability. Groups needed methods for preserving fall nut harvests and fish runs to sustain populations through winter scarcity. Archaeological evidence documents increasingly sophisticated food preservation techniques, including smoking, drying, and underground storage in specially constructed pits. The Costa site in Illinois preserves exceptional evidence for these storage systems, including multiple pit features designed to maintain stable temperatures and humidity levels that prevented spoilage of stored foods. The development of effective storage systems enabled population growth in regions that had previously supported only sparse human occupation. Groups could now survive in areas where seasonal resource fluctuations would have made year-round occupation impossible without stored supplies. This expansion into new territories contributed to the regional diversification of archaeological cultures as populations adapted technologies and subsistence strategies to local environmental conditions. Trade networks persisted despite reduced mobility, though their character changed fundamentally from Clovis patterns. Rather than individuals carrying exotic lithic materials across hundreds of kilometers during seasonal migrations, post-Clovis exchange operated through down-the-line trading between neighboring groups. Chemical sourcing studies demonstrate that high-quality toolstone continued moving across substantial distances, but archaeological distributions suggest materials pass through multiple intermediate groups rather than being transported directly from source to consumer. These exchange networks maintained cultural connections across regions while facilitating information transfer about technological innovations and environmental conditions. A group experiencing resource stress in one area could learn about successful adaptations developed by distant populations through information flowing along trading networks. This communication system, though operating at slower speeds than during Clovis times, enabled continued cultural evolution through sharing of innovations across geographical space. The archaeological landscape of this transition period reveals both dramatic changes and fundamental continuities. While specific technologies and settlement patterns underwent revolutionary transformation, certain core aspects of hunter-gatherer life persisted. Groups continued organizing themselves into small bands composed of related families. Seasonal mobility remained important despite reduced territorial ranges. Sophisticated environmental knowledge continued providing the foundation for successful resource exploitation. These continuities remind us that cultural adaptation involves modification of existing patterns rather than complete abandonment of ancestral ways. The speed of these transformations challenges traditional archaeological assumptions about the pace of cultural change in prehistoric societies. Within mere centuries, North American populations developed entirely new technological systems, reorganized settlement patterns, and restructured subsistence economies. This rapid evolution demonstrates human cultural flexibility in responding to environmental challenges. The same cognitive and social capabilities that had enabled Clovis expansion across a continent now facilitated successful adaptation to post-megafauna environments that demanded entirely different survival strategies. Modern genetic studies reveal that biological continuity persisted through these cultural transformations. The Anzic genome demonstrates that Clovis populations were directly ancestral to later Native American groups, despite the apparent cultural discontinuities in archaeological records. This pattern of biological continuity, combined with cultural transformation, suggests that existing populations successfully adapted rather than being replaced by new migrants. The human capacity for cultural innovation enabled survival through environmental catastrophes that drove numerous species to extinction. Understanding these transitions provides crucial insights into human resilience and adaptive capacity. Faced with the collapse of resource bases that had sustained their ancestors for generations, post-Clovis populations didn't simply perish. They innovated, experimented, and ultimately succeeded in creating viable lifeways adapted to transformed environmental conditions. This achievement established the foundation for thousands of years of subsequent Native American cultural development, demonstrating that human societies possess remarkable capabilities for responding creatively to environmental challenges that threaten traditional ways of life. The sophisticated material culture and daily life practices that characterized Clovis populations were expressed across a geographic range that encompassed virtually the entire North American continent, from the ice-free corridors of Alaska to the tropical environments of northern South America. This extraordinary distribution represents one of the most rapid and extensive cultural expansions in human prehistory, achieved within a time span of less than 7 centuries. Archaeological evidence reveals that Clovis technology and cultural practices spread across approximately 4.5 million square kilometers. adapting to environments ranging from Arctic tundra to subtropical forests while maintaining remarkable technological consistency across vast distances. The northernmost Clovis sites extend into Alaska and the Yukon Territory, where groups adapted their technologies to harsh subarctic conditions, characterized by extreme seasonal temperature variations and limited growing seasons. The Broken Mammoth site in central Alaska preserves evidence of Clovis occupation dating to approximately 13,000 years ago, featuring distinctive fluted points associated with hearth features and tool manufacturing debris. The lithic assemblage from this site demonstrates adaptations to local raw material sources, including extensive use of high-quality chert from regional geological formations that provided alternatives to the exotic materials commonly transported across great distances in more southern regions. Alaskan Clovis sites reveal modifications in settlement patterns that reflect adaptations to extreme northern environments. Sites tend to be located in sheltered valley locations that provided protection from harsh winds, while offering access to reliable water sources and game migration routes. The distribution of these northern sites follows major river systems that served as natural corridors for both human movement and animal migrations, creating predictable zones of resource concentration that could support human populations during brief summer seasons. Moving southward, the Great Plains region contains the highest density of Clovis sites anywhere in North America, reflecting both optimal environmental conditions for preservation and the exceptional abundance of resources that supported substantial Clovis populations. The Llano Estacado of eastern New Mexico and western Texas alone contains over 50 documented Clovis localities, creating a concentration of archaeological sites unmatched anywhere else on the continent. This density pattern reflects the optimal combination of abundant megafauna populations, extensive high-quality lithic resources, and environmental conditions that favored both human occupation and archaeological preservation. Plains Clovis sites demonstrate the most intensive megafauna hunting activities documented anywhere in the archaeological record. Sites like Blackwater Draw, Murray Springs, and Lena preserve evidence for systematic mammoth and bison hunting that involved sophisticated coordinated strategies and intensive carcass processing activities. The artifact assemblages from these sites include the largest and most elaborate Clovis points known, with some specimens exceeding 15 centimeters in length and displaying exceptional craftsmanship that represents the pinnacle of Clovis lithic technology. The morphological characteristics of Plains Clovis points reflect adaptations to the specific requirements of megafauna hunting in open grassland environments. These implements typically feature broad, robust blades with reinforced tips, capable of penetrating the thick hides and dense musculature of mammoth and mastodon. The fluting on plain specimens tends to be particularly well executed, with channels extending up to 2/3 the length of the point and demonstrating the exceptional skill levels achieved by craftsmen in this region. Eastern North America presents a dramatically different pattern of Clovis site distribution, with occupations scattered across diverse forested environments from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. The lower density of eastern sites compared to plains concentrations likely reflects both environmental factors that influence preservation and different settlement strategies adapted to forested environments with more dispersed resource bases. Eastern Clovis sites tend to occur in association with major river systems, wetland margins, and other landscape features that concentrated resources in otherwise heavily forested regions. The Shawnee Minisink site in Pennsylvania exemplifies eastern Clovis adaptations to riverine environments that provided access to diverse aquatic and terrestrial resources. Excavations at this site revealed evidence for systematic exploitation of fish, waterfowl, and plant resources alongside more traditional Clovis hunting activities. The artifact assemblage includes specialized tools for processing aquatic resources and plant materials, demonstrating the technological flexibility that enabled Eastern Clovis groups to exploit diverse resource bases. Morphological variations in Eastern Clovis points reflect adaptations to forested hunting environments where different strategies were required for pursuing game in dense vegetation. Eastern specimens tend to be smaller and more finely crafted than their plains counterparts, with thinner cross-sections and more delicate fluting that reflects different functional requirements. The reduced size and weight of eastern points may reflect adaptations to hunting smaller game species, or the need for improved accuracy in forested environments where shot distances were limited by vegetation. Southeastern Clovis sites reveal adaptations to warm, humid environments that supported different plant and animal communities than those found in northern regions. Sites like Page Ladson in Florida preserve evidence for Clovis. Occupation in association with mastodon remains in underwater contexts that provide exceptional preservation of organic materials. These sites demonstrate that Clovis groups successfully adapted their technologies and subsistence strategies to subtropical environments while maintaining the distinctive cultural characteristics that define the tradition. Western North America presents perhaps the most diverse range of Clovis adaptations, with sites distributed across environments ranging from Pacific coastal regions to high-elevation mountain valleys. The complex topography and diverse environmental zones of the western regions created opportunities for specialized adaptations while presenting challenges for maintaining cultural connections across fragmented landscapes. Western Clovis sites often occur in association with distinctive geological features that provided access to high-quality lithic resources or strategic advantages for hunting activities. The East Wenatchee site in Washington state demonstrates Western Clovis adaptations to mountainous environments through its remarkable cache of tools manufactured from exotic materials obtained from sources scattered across the Pacific Northwest. The implements in this cache display exceptional craftsmanship and include some of the most elaborate Clovis points known anywhere, suggesting that Western groups achieved particularly high levels of technological sophistication. Coastal Clovis adaptations along the Pacific shore involved technologies for exploiting marine and estuarine resources that supplemented terrestrial hunting activities. Sites on the Channel Islands of California preserve evidence for early maritime adaptations that included sophisticated watercraft technology and systematic exploitation of marine mammals. These coastal adaptations demonstrate the remarkable flexibility of Clovis cultural systems in responding to diverse environmental opportunities while maintaining technological and cultural coherence. The relationship between Clovis and contemporary archaeological cultures provides insights into the cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America and the processes through which different technological traditions developed and spread. The Folsom culture, which succeeded Clovis across much of the Great Plains after 12,800 years ago, represents a clear technological continuation that maintained many Clovis characteristics while developing distinctive innovations adapted to changing environmental conditions following megafauna extinctions. Folsom projectile points exhibit clear technological relationships to Clovis prototypes, while displaying distinctive modifications that reflect adaptations to different hunting requirements. Folsom points feature more extensive fluting that often extends the full length of the implement, creating extremely thin cross-sections that required exceptional manufacturing skill to produce successfully. The development of this enhanced fluting technology represents a technological intensification that built upon Clovis innovations while pushing lithic manufacturing techniques to new levels of sophistication. Contemporary cultures in other regions show varying degrees of relationship to Clovis technological traditions, reflecting the complex cultural dynamics of late Pleistocene North America. The Gainey culture of the Great Lakes region exhibits clear Clovis affinities in projectile point technology, while displaying distinctive regional characteristics in other tool categories. Gainey points feature Clovis-style fluting and overall morphology, but tend to be manufactured from different raw materials and show subtle variations in proportional relationships. Site preservation issues significantly influence our understanding of Clovis geographic distribution and create biases that affect interpretations of settlement patterns and population densities. The archaeological visibility of Clovis occupations varies dramatically across different environmental zones, with preservation conditions in some regions providing excellent opportunities for site discovery, while other areas offer limited potential for archaeological detection of ancient occupations. Arid and semi-arid regions of the American Southwest provide optimal preservation conditions for Clovis sites through low precipitation levels that minimize chemical weathering and erosion processes that could destroy archaeological deposits. The alkaline soils characteristic of these regions also favor preservation of bone and other organic materials that provide crucial evidence for Clovis subsistence activities and technological practices. The high visibility of artifacts in desert environments facilitates site discovery and creates sampling biases that may overrepresent Clovis occupation of arid regions. Forested regions of eastern North America present significant challenges for Clovis site preservation and discovery through acidic soil conditions that destroy bone materials and dense vegetation that obscures surface artifacts. The deep soil development characteristic of forested environments often buries archaeological deposits beneath substantial overburden that makes site detection difficult without systematic subsurface testing. Coastal regions present particular challenges for understanding Clovis distributions due to sea level changes that have submerged many potential sites beneath modern ocean waters. The 120-meter sea level rise that occurred following the end of the Pleistocene placed vast areas of former coastline beneath the continental shelves, removing potential Clovis sites from archaeological accessibility. Recent advances in archaeological survey techniques and site detection methods are beginning to address some of these preservation and visibility issues through systematic approaches that can identify buried sites and recognize archaeological deposits in challenging environmental contexts. Remote sensing technologies, geophysical survey methods, and systematic subsurface testing programs are revealing Clovis sites in regions where traditional survey approaches had failed to detect ancient occupations. As more sites are discovered and investigated using modern archaeological methods, our understanding of Clovis cultural geography continues to evolve, revealing increasingly complex patterns of adaptation and regional variation across the North American continent. The remarkable geographic distribution and regional adaptations that characterize Clovis culture demonstrate the extraordinary flexibility and adaptive capacity that enabled these early Americans to successfully colonize diverse environments within an astonishingly brief period. Their achievements established the foundation for all subsequent human cultural development in North America, creating precedents for technological innovation, social organization, and environmental adaptation that would influence indigenous societies for millennia to come. The story of the Clovis people transcends simple archaeological chronology. It represents humanity's remarkable capacity for innovation under pressure, for adaptation when familiar worlds collapse, for survival when everything known transforms overnight. These pioneering Americans achieved something extraordinary. Within 7 centuries, they spread sophisticated technologies across an entire continent, developed complex social systems, maintaining cultural coherence across continental distances, created tool-making traditions so advanced that modern experts struggle to replicate them despite years of practice. Their legacy extends far beyond distinctive fluted points preserved in museum collections. The Anzic genome proves direct biological connections between Clovis populations and modern Native Americans. Every indigenous person in the Americas carries genetic heritage traceable to these pioneering ancestors. Their blood flows through descendants who would build civilizations from the Arctic to Tierra del Fuego, who would develop agricultural systems feeding millions, who would construct cities rivaling any in the ancient world. But Clovis culture itself vanished, not through conquest or disease, through environmental transformation so rapid and severe that even their extraordinary adaptive capabilities couldn't preserve traditional lifeways. The Younger Dryas cooling episode beginning 12,900 years ago created conditions that made megafauna hunting unsustainable. Mammoth populations collapsed under combined pressures of climate change and human predation. Mastodon herds dwindled across eastern forests. Giant ground sloths disappeared from landscapes they'd inhabited for millions of years. Faced with this catastrophe, Clovis populations made choices. Some groups couldn't adapt. Their sites show evidence of abandonment. Territories once supporting thriving communities left empty as resource bases collapsed. Archaeological records document declining human presence across vast regions during the terminal Clovis period. These populations may have died out entirely, or scattered into smaller groups whose archaeological signatures remain invisible. Other populations demonstrated resilience that would define human history. They innovated, experimented, transformed their entire subsistence systems within generations. The Folsom culture emerging on the Great Plains represents perhaps the clearest example. These descendants of Clovis hunters developed even more sophisticated fluting techniques, created projectile points of such delicacy that modern nappers fail more often than they succeed in attempting reproductions. But they abandoned mammoth hunting entirely, focused instead on bison populations that survived environmental changes. Dalton groups across the southeast developed completely different solutions. They diversified resource bases dramatically, invested in plant processing equipment their mammoth hunting ancestors would have considered impossibly cumbersome. Established seasonal rounds exploiting fish, nuts, deer, turkey, and dozens of plant species. This wasn't desperate improvisation. It was systematic environmental management requiring encyclopedic knowledge. Western populations abandoned fluting altogether, developed stemmed point traditions offering distinct advantages for new hunting strategies. Each regional tradition represented successful solutions to local challenges. The speed of these innovations suggests rapid cultural evolution driven by environmental necessity rather than gradual refinement over millennia. The transition from Clovis to post-Clovis cultures demonstrates something profound about human nature. We are not prisoners of tradition. When circumstances demand change, human societies can transform fundamentally within single lifetimes. The same cognitive flexibility that enabled Clovis expansion across continents facilitated successful adaptation to transformed environments. Modern archaeological research continues revealing new dimensions of this story. Ancient DNA analysis provides unprecedented insights into population relationships and demographic processes. Improved dating techniques refine chronologies with precision impossible just decades ago. Remote sensing technologies discover sites that traditional survey methods missed entirely. Each new discovery adds complexity to our understanding, but certain patterns have emerged clearly. Clovis technology represented genuine innovation rather than simple continuation of Asian traditions. The distinctive fluting technique appears to have developed in North America rather than being imported from elsewhere. This indigenous innovation then spread across entire continents within centuries through social learning mechanisms and cultural transmission systems we're only beginning to understand. The debate over Clovis roles in Pleistocene extinctions will likely never be fully resolved. Did human hunting drive megafauna to extinction? Or did climate change eliminate these species while humans merely witnessed their demise? Evidence suggests both factors operated synergistically. Populations already stressed by habitat loss became vulnerable to even modest hunting pressure. Human predation may not have caused extinctions alone, but it likely delivered final blows to populations already struggling with environmental change. This matters beyond academic archaeology. We live in an era of rapid environmental transformation, climate change, habitat destruction, species extinctions. The Clovis experience offers sobering lessons about what happens when humans encounter naive prey populations, about how quickly sophisticated civilizations can collapse when environmental foundations erode, about the importance of adaptive flexibility when familiar worlds transform. But it also demonstrates human resilience, our capacity for innovation under pressure, our ability to develop entirely new lifeways when traditional strategies fail. The descendants of Clovis hunters didn't simply vanish when mammoths went extinct. They transformed themselves, created new cultures adapted to changed circumstances, survived to become ancestors of populations that would eventually number in tens of millions across the Americas. The Clovis achievement deserves recognition as one of humanity's great accomplishments. These people colonized 2 continents within mere centuries, developed technologies that remained unsurpassed for thousands of years, created social systems enabling cooperation across vast distances, adapted successfully to environments from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, all while possessing no metal tools, no domesticated animals except dogs, no agriculture, no written language. They succeeded through knowledge, through skills passed from experts to apprentices across generations, through social networks that shared information and innovations across continental distances, through environmental wisdom, enabling them to read landscapes and predict animal behavior with precision. We've largely lost, through technological sophistication that combined practical effectiveness with aesthetic beauty. Standing before a Clovis point in a museum case, it's easy to see merely an ancient artifact, a curiosity from a vanished world. But look closer. Examine the precise symmetry, the controlled flaking creating edges sharper than surgical steel, the channel flute running 2/3 the point's length, removed through a single strike requiring perfect knowledge of stone properties and flaking dynamics. This represents human excellence, the culmination of knowledge systems developed over millennia, skills requiring years to master properly, standards maintained across continental distances through cultural transmission mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. These weren't primitive people making crude tools. These were master craftsmen creating precision instruments that pushed technological boundaries of what could be achieved with stone. Their story reminds us that human capabilities extend far beyond what modern industrial civilization has achieved. That profound knowledge can exist without written records, that sophisticated technologies can be developed without metals or machines, that complex societies can function without centralized governments or formal institutions. The Clovis people faced challenges we struggle to imagine, confronting creatures that could kill humans with single blows, surviving climatic extremes that would kill unprepared individuals within hours, maintaining social cohesion across populations scattered over millions of square kilometers, adapting technologies and strategies to dozens of different environments, responding to environmental catastrophes that eliminated most large mammal species from entire continents. They succeeded through characteristics we still possess: cognitive flexibility, social cooperation, technological innovation, environmental knowledge, adaptive capacity. The same traits that enabled their remarkable achievements remain available to us. The same challenges they faced, environmental transformation, resource depletion, social coordination across large populations, confront modern society in different forms. Their legacy lives in every Native American population, in the archaeological sites scattered across the Americas, in the genetic heritage carried by millions of descendants, in the technological innovations that influence subsequent cultures for thousands of years, in the proof that human societies can successfully colonize and adapt to diverse environments with remarkable speed. But perhaps most importantly, the Clovis story demonstrates that human cultural achievements can be both extraordinary and fragile, that sophisticated societies can collapse when environmental foundations erode. That survival requires not just technological excellence, but adaptive flexibility when familiar worlds transform. That innovation and experimentation become essential when traditional strategies no longer work. As we face our own era of rapid environmental change, the Clovis experience offers both warning and hope. Warning about how quickly successful adaptations can become obsolete when environments transform. Hope because it demonstrates human capacity for fundamental cultural transformation when circumstances demand change. The Clovis people remind us that we are not the first humans to face continental-scale environmental challenges, not the first to witness mass extinctions, not the first to need fundamental adaptations when familiar worlds collapse. But we might learn from their example, from their innovations, from their resilience, from their ultimate success in creating new lifeways adapted to transformed circumstances. Their story began in frozen Beringia, continued across 2 continents within mere centuries, culminated in technological achievements that remain impressive 13,000 years later, ended with environmental catastrophe that eliminated the megafauna resources supporting their way of life. But their descendants survived, adapted, thrived, eventually populated the entire Western Hemisphere with societies of remarkable diversity and complexity. That is the Clovis legacy. Not just distinctive projectile points or archaeological sites, but the demonstration that human societies possess extraordinary capacity for achievement under challenging circumstances, for innovation when traditional approaches fail, for survival when worlds transform, for creating new cultures from ruins of old ones. Their blood flows through millions of descendants. Their technological innovations influenced cultures for millennia. Their achievements established foundations for all subsequent human cultural development in the Americas. Their story reminds us that human potential exceeds what any single society achieves, that knowledge and capability can exist in forms we barely recognize, that success requires not just technological excellence, but adaptive flexibility when circumstances demand change. The Clovis people spread across a continent, mastered environments from Arctic to tropics, developed technologies of remarkable sophistication, created social systems enabling cooperation across vast distances, and ultimately adapted successfully when their world transformed beyond recognition. That is a legacy worth remembering, a story worth telling, an achievement that deserves recognition as one of humanity's great accomplishments. And now you know their story, from frozen Beringia to the collapse of the Pleistocene, from the first fluted points to the environmental catastrophe that ended their way of life, from their remarkable achievements to their ultimate transformation into the diverse cultures that would populate the Americas for thousands of years to come. Human, we are a fascinating species, capable of extraordinary achievements, vulnerable to environmental changes beyond our control, resilient enough to survive when worlds collapse, innovative enough to create entirely new cultures when traditional ones fail. The Clovis people proved all of this 13,000 years ago. Their story continues to resonate because it reveals fundamental truths about what humans can achieve and what we must do to survive when everything changes. That is what the Clovis people teach us. That is why their story matters. That is why we continue studying their sites, analyzing their tools, and trying to understand their lives, 13 millennia after their distinctive technology disappeared from the archaeological record. Because they represent human potential at its finest, human vulnerability at its most stark, human resilience at its most impressive. The first Americans, the Clovis people, pioneers who crossed a continent, masters who created technological marvels, hunters who confronted creatures we can barely imagine, survivors who adapted when their world transformed, ancestors whose legacy continues in millions of descendants. Their story began 13,500 years ago in the waning days of the last ice age. It continues today in every person who carries their genetic heritage, in every archaeologist who studies their sites, in every person who marvels at the sophistication of their stonework, in everyone who learns that human achievement takes forms we might not recognize. That success comes in many varieties. That survival sometimes requires abandoning everything familiar and creating entirely new ways of living. The Clovis people did exactly that. They succeeded spectacularly. They ultimately transformed into something new when circumstances demanded change. That is their story. That is their legacy. That is what they teach us about what humans can achieve when we combine knowledge, skill, cooperation, and adaptive flexibility in pursuit of survival in challenging and changing worlds.